course, thank you. My name is Kristian Lindhardt, in Danish pronounced Christian. um, I'm a journalist from Denmark, and right now residing in what's now called Vancouver, on the unceded territories of Tsleil-Waututh Nation, Musqueam and Squamish. And I'm here making a documentary that I've been working on for a bit over 2 years, following the indigenous-led resistance towards fossil fuel industry projects and the colonial government. So I'm covering the court cases, the protests, sort of everything that happens within the movement, as much as I can with my time. Sure. Well, I was working as a journalist and found an increasing frustration that I felt the whole coverage was shifted in the wrong way. We were only hearing from people responsible for solving the climate crisis, but who aren't, or from scientists. Like, to me, it was only covered politically or scientifically. And to me and to billions of people in the world, the climate crisis is an existential crisis, is an emotional crisis, it's a spiritual crisis, it's a mental health crisis. It's a lot of other things than just the science and the politics of it. And I had this like kind of sentence in my head that kept coming back to me. That was the people who've done the least to cause climate change are the first ones to be hit by it and hit the hardest. And just the moral injustice of that is reason enough, but also that there's all these solutions and important voices that should be centered in this whole period of time, but isn't being or still being held back. So living in Canada previously to this, I already started to get a sense that there's so much stuff covered up here. Canada likes to project itself as this progressive, green climate leader, when in fact it's the opposite. And especially in regards to the indigenous nations who live here and who's lived here for 30,000 years. Canada is a very new project with European companies coming over to extract resources and taking indigenous peoples away from their lands to gain access to those resources. And that's the whole basis of this country. So I thought, if I can show it somewhere where it's still so prevalent and it happened so recently, maybe people will start waking up in Denmark as well to Denmark's relationship to the Inuit in Greenland and just in general around the world, that there's this decolonization movement that's happening and that needs to happen in order to solve the climate crisis. Well, the story has sort of different layers, so it will be focused on a family and a wider community, the nations in Canada in total a little bit, and then kind of the global indigenous revolution that's kind of uprising at the moment, where there's a lot of connections being made. So the reason for focusing in on the George Parker family is just to have a kind of heart of the story, is people we can relate to when we talk about these huge concepts and structures of colonialism and capitalism, to really see it happening in one person or in a family, in relationships. And the special thing about the George Parker family is that they're all speakers, they're all public speakers, and they have really incredible voices and words and way of speaking that really connects with people. So I thought it'd be interesting as well to kind of anchor this whole story around speeches. So instead of having a voiceover or interviews like we're having right now, I'd have like the more dynamic live speeches be the core of it, and then kind of show around the speeches like the underwater, like the iceberg underneath the surface, everything that they each of them bring to that stage every time they speak. Because something I've found as well, with my critique of the political and the scientific coverage only is also when there's coverage of activism, climate activism. I see that a lot of activists who aren't themselves in danger of losing their lives right now, or who hasn't lost family to these structures, are kind of being centered in the movement. So they might bring some anger or fear of the future, or frustration that they're having to spend their youth doing this. All of this they bring to the stage, but I'm trying to show with this film that for a lot of indigenous peoples around the world, it's centuries, even thousands of years of knowledge, pain, tradition, ceremony that they bring to the stage every time. It's a lot deeper for them. It's the original climate activist, which we would kind of actually even be insulting to call it, because it's not even activism. It's just in their bones. It's how they live their lives. It's culturally, socially manifested in everything they do. So I thought it would only make sense to center them in this global climate crisis.
Hey, what's up, everybody in the whole damn world? We out here in the shores of Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. And what we got right here is a tanker full of pipe for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We're out here taking direct action, stopping it.
I don't have enough time. I have 10 seconds to say what I have to say.
You're not going to be nervous, Craig. You know, all the people that are marching here, the majority of them have lost somebody here. You know, I lost a cousin who was murdered by Picton. Even my dad, not too far from here, died in the bathroom, and just about 300 feet away. So everyone here has lost somebody. You know, we're standing up and we're saying something because they did a murder and missing woman inquiry, which is bullshit. Because who they should have did an inquiry on was the judges, the police, the Canadian government. The system is broken and it's wrong, and the hurt that's still happening to our Indigenous people since residential school, before residential school, is still happening now here today.
You're doing it for my dad. I'm doing it for Uncle Nathan. My dad had no voice. Uncle Nathan has no voice. You're being the voice for all the people who don't have a voice.
Last thing we want to make sure we have folks do is text Tacoma to 67760. That's the way that you can get plugged into all of the events that are happening in your area across the Puget Sound region, Tacoma, down in Olympia.
Squile Tanoya, Halia Queen Kushamin, Kaya George Queen Sna. Hi, my name is Kaya George, and I'm here. I'm from Tsleil-Waututh Nation and Tulalip tribes. I'm here to stand for a greener future for our future generations. I'm here to stand with Indigenous peoples fighting against oil and gas pipelines going through their sacred territories.
Yeah, well, just like everything else, it's a deeper story, because the Canadian police kind of started off as these protectors of these resource companies. So they were really kind of like the American police was originally patrols for enslaved people. The police here really have that background. So we're kind of seeing colonialism being played out in real time right now. So what's happened back then in 2019 was when I was here last, because I was here just before COVID broke out for 6 months, and then I came back a few months ago. So I've kind of seen both waves of the recent waves of what happened up in Wet'suwet'en. So the first part, what you're saying, happened when I was here the first time, and it completely shocked me, and it's still happening to this day, even though I've been covering this for a while. That just the extremity of it is just horrifying, and the indifference in the public and the general like consensus that this is just ongoing. So I know the UN have been looking at Canada for a while. There's been a report saying that the missing and murdered Indigenous women is considered a genocide. And I would say this whole combined thing is a genocide in itself. Also, when the police move out and are prepared to shoot Indigenous land defenders. So this is people living on their own lands, just trying to protect their lands from oil and gas pipelines that are going to be built through their lands without their consent. And when Wet'suwet'en, it's going to go through their main water source. They never approved this, so they're only trying to stop that from happening. And the Canadian authorities are moving in with, they call it police, but to me it looks more like military, because they're heavily armed with rifle, like machine rifles. I'm not even sure what it's called because it's so foreign to me, coming from Denmark, and with like heavy army gear and like being dropped from helicopters onto Indigenous peoples on their own territories. It's horrifying, and it's terrible, and the only positive thing is that it's starting to get a little bit more attention, but it just needs to be covered worldwide, and there needs to be way more attention on it than already is. Well, she's absolutely right, Naomi Klein, when she says that. There was even this clip that really went kind of viral a few weeks ago of Justin Trudeau kind of involuntarily admitting that he was doing some kind of interview or panel, and he stumbled over his words and said something like Canada has always been an oil-producing country, and he corrected himself.
How do you see the energy transition in Canada?
Well, Canada is a major oil and gas producing country. It is something that has always been part of our makeup as a country. We are a country of vast spaces of great natural resources and energy resources.
And sometimes, reality kind of beats fiction in a way, or like the truth will come out. And that's what happened in that moment, and why it was so satirical, because he, for one moment, actually completely spoke the truth. Canada is more a company than a country. The country was made to morally justify the resource extractions and the horrible atrocities that these companies and with the Catholic Church did onto the Indigenous peoples. So I'd more say that's why I sometimes even write Canada in my tweet in quotation marks, because I want to bring awareness to it being an idea that someone thought of, and just questioning why we should hold authority of some European companies that came over 100 or 200 years ago, and just calling it a country, instead of all these nations who've lived here for up to 30,000 years, or for time immemorial, as they say themselves. And I've seen this in the courts as well, like seeing the judge literally being called the crown, sitting with the crown in on the wall behind her. It's been the same judge in most of these cases I followed, and the crown, it's called that because it's literally the crown that sits on Queen Elizabeth's head in the UK. So there's all these very obvious signs of it that people have just gotten used to over here. But coming in as an outsider, which is a reason why I wanted to come here and cover it as well, is to kind of see it with fresh eyes, because sometimes it looks more like stepping onto a movie set when you kind of start to learn about these things, because it all seems so fake and it all seems so newly built. And these laws have just been made up to kind of uphold these resource extractive processes. So I thought if we can show this in Canada, because everyone knows a lot about what's going on in the States, even in the Amazon in Brazil, for example. But I thought if we can show what's happening here in Canada, people will start to see that it's really happening everywhere, and it can be just as bad or even worse in some of the progressive countries. It's been disappointing. Sometimes I'm not surprised, because that's kind of the reason I came here, is because I knew that was a thing. It wasn't being covered enough. But it's been really disappointing and frustrating as well, especially since when you're covering like such horrific things that happened, and you know for sure, it to me it seems like one of the most important stories in the whole world. So to kind of have to like go through the process of pitching, I don't know if you've ever like been to an editorial meeting and like having to pitch your ideas. I'm guessing you guys do the same. Just having someone who has no maybe background of knowledge of these things, and I know it's something that's goes against what a lot of people in Denmark believe, even journalists too. A lot of people in Denmark don't even know that there are indigenous peoples in Canada. That Canada is a very new country. So I'm being constantly shocked and surprised by how hard it is to get these stories through, and having to kind of sell them, which also feels a little bit disgusting, to be honest, when these things are happening to people that I sources and friends that I've gotten to know over the last few years and gotten really close with as well. Seeing their pain and their struggles and not being heard all the time, and then having an editor who like can't really see the angle or doesn't think it's that exciting, just turn it down without looking further into it, has been a constant source of frustration. But I'm starting to find other formats of getting those stories out, and actually my whole Twitter activity has been kind of a remedy to that, because I've been so occupied with filming a documentary, which is very demanding and time consuming, that every time I've had an article turned down, or like didn't think I'd had time to really rewrite something or pitch it again, I'll just get stuff out on Twitter like fast, because it's so important to me that these things are shared immediately. And the challenge of making a documentary is that it can take a little while, and then everything might have happened when it comes out. So I want this to be a kind of live process, and sharing as much as I can while I'm going through this this documentary process too. Well, the story, it's the story of reconnection. It's a story of reconnecting with your heart, with our bodies, with each other, with ourselves. Because a lot of us around the world don't realize that we have gone through a similar transition. It might have been less violent in our areas of the world, but taking us away from nature and away from our spiritual practices, away from really connecting with each other, has happened gradually over the last 1,000, 2,000, maybe more years around the world. So it's a story of some of the people who are the closest to that source of who we really are as humans, who can maybe teach us and help us reconnect with that. and while fighting for justice and stopping these extractive industries that really don't work for any of us, but are just taking a lot of money and resources and put it in their pockets. So I want to center this on, like, make it a very personal story, but that kind of can teach you something about the world in general, why we're here right now, and how we get out of it, and how we build a better world.
These are the building blocks that make up our organization and the goals we would like to achieve. In order to continue our journalism until 2022 and realize these values fundamental to our democracy, we need 1,000 supporters in our crowdfunding campaign, donating only €5 or dollars per month via Patreon or bank account. Right now, we have only 200 supporters and are not able to take the next step. Our future is in your hands. Strengthen independent journalism and be part of meaningful change.